Hey, this is Lydia Walagorski, Public Policy Director of ING Colorado and Chair of the Task Force. Hey, this is Lydia Walagorski, Public Policy
Would it be
Director of
helpful if I
ING
just called
Colorado
everybody's name?
and
Sorry, Stacey,
Chair
for over
of
talking
the
you there.
Task Force.
Just to check and see who's all on.
Hey, this is
Stacey,
Lydia
Cam,
Walagorski,
Greg.
Thank you. Policy
Would it be
Director of
helpful if I
ING
just called
Colorado.
everybody's name? Edmira Marcus and Mark Pickering. My name is Greg Belomo. We also have Bob Inco on the phone. Who did I miss?
Dana Ingood from USAA.
Welcome, Dana. How about Edwin Zoe? Sandra Parker Murray. Diana Petrak.
Yeah, I joined finally.
Hi, Diana. Welcome.
Hi.
Judith Marquez.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm on the line.
Welcome, Judith. Kevin Duncan. Okay. How about Joe Barella? Okay. So last call: Edwin, Hadley, Sandra, Kevin, or Joe.
Hadley's here. Oops, I don't know if I'm muted. Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. I'm here.
No, you're fine now, Hadley. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Greg, this is Pat Teagarden.
Hey, Pat. Welcome. Are you?
Hi.
How about your partner, Cher?
Cher and I are both here together, and I just wanted to let you know Joe will be calling in as soon as he lands. He's traveling right now, but he'll be calling in late.
All right. Very well. Thanks.
Thank
Pat
you.
and Cher. Okay.
So did
joining now.
Can I just ask, did we decide the best way to mute is to hit *6 again or to just mute on our phones? If we want to mute ourselves.
If you're on the phone, I think the right number is mute.
Okay.
Just hit the mute button. Simplest.
Okay.
Okay.
This is Bob Inco. Can I just have a technical support quickly? I lost the screen. I mean I can hear everybody's voice, but I can't. Somehow I lost the screen.
Okay. I still have it live. Jeff,
Is
go
there
ahead.
any button here that I should have?
So, Bob, this is Jeff Fitzgerald. Are you seeing my agenda on your screen, or are you just seeing black?
No, I'm not seeing the screen at all. Maybe I closed it inadvertently. So how do I?
Yeah. Maybe just navigate out of whatever screen you're in and go back into the invitation and click the Google's Hangouts meeting button.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Will I be disconnected that way or?
No, if you're joining via telephone, you'll stay on audio and you'll just work through the screen component separately.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Jeff, will there be a PowerPoint or slides or anything that I need to connect through a computer for?
I don't believe we're going to have any slides today. So all people are seeing via the computer is the agenda that was presented. So no real urgency to connect to the Hangout.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Before we go back to the agenda, let's just do one quick sweep and see if we picked up Edwin, Sandra, or Kevin. Any of the three of you able to dial in since we did roll call? All right. Lydia, would you like to cover the objectives and agenda, or would you prefer that I do that?
Go ahead, Greg.
and to have some, some back and forth dialogue, hopefully to help the task force understand what's possible, help to eliminate any parameters, challenges, etc. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob to perhaps give some background on himself and his company, and then we can get into some dialogue. Bob?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. Bob, my name is Bob Inco. I'm the founder and president of AMI Response. How do I eliminate it? For some reason, I have an echo. Can you guys hear me?
So Bob, it's possible you're joining both by the telephone and by the computer. So our advice would be to mute there should be a mute button on the computer itself on your screen, and hit that and just talk to the telephone.
Okay, what about that? Oh, okay, I still have. No, I'm just joining by computer.
Sounds fine to us.
Sounds good.
For some reason, I'm hearing an echo though. Shucks. Should I just sign off and then sign in again? Basically reboot?
So Bob, my suggestion would be to join audio via the telephone as opposed to via the computer.
Oh, my telephone. I guess I have to get a phone. All right. Well, let me go ahead with this one. Okay. AMI Actuarial Consultants is an actuarial risk management consulting firm out of Miami, Florida. We've been around 27 years, and we've been servicing mostly, municipalities, states, different cities, school boards, and that kind of thing. We're currently doing some work for Colorado, specifically with regards to multiple workers' compensation injury. Basically, the funding for that entity. So the scope of my work, as I understand it, is to estimate the costs of the various underlying events that would lead into a let me call using the phone, because I guess I can't function this way. It bothers me. Okay, let me just cut off for a moment.
Okay, we'll be patient. Thanks, Bob.
I'm sorry about this.
It's okay. We'll talk to you in a second.
Okay.
Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Hey, Greg, do we want to, since we're waiting a minute here, do we want to talk about some of the dialogue with the four of us regarding the November and December meetings?
Yeah, I think that would make sense, Jeff. do you want to share kind of where Lydia and Stacy have net out in terms of logical dates?
Sure. So, Lydia and Stacy, jump in here if I get anything wrong. But we were looking at November 12th. And bear in mind, folks, again, appreciate your responding to the survey. These aren't dates that every single person was able to meet, but it is what the vast majority of people were able to make. And so in November, we talked about doing a meeting on the 12th. And then on December 2nd, a phone call that would have Bob ideally walk through the conclusions from the actuary analysis, and then an in-person meeting, most likely on the December 17th. Did we decide on that, Lydia?
I believe so, yes.
So now, at present, I think we're just trying to nail down exact how long each meeting will be and the duration before we send out, hold the dates. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's how I know it, Jeff.
Okay. So again, that's November 12th, December 2nd, and December 17th. If you have availability within those windows, please hold those for the time being, and you should get an invitation from me, probably before our meeting on Thursday, locking in those times, and if not, shortly thereafter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bob, have you been able to get back in?
Hi, everyone. This is Evan Joe. I apologize, I'm a little late.
This is Stacy Campbell. Greg, it may be worth sending him the correct telephone number.
Yeah.
339-225-9050.
Yeah, Stacy, Mary and I were just chatting about that as well. We're on top of that. We'll get it to him. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yep. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
So how about one quick round of the phone to see if we picked up anybody else? Kevin Duncan? Sandra Parker Murray? We got Joe. How about Edwin Zoe?
Here.
Okay, Edwin, okay. Would have been you plus Joe. Okay. All right, then Sandra and Kevin are the only ones that we don't have from all both voting and non-voting members. How
I'm
about
sorry,
Bob Inco?
Greg.
Bob?
Pardon me, Greg.
Yeah?
This is Kevin Duncan. I had myself muted this whole time, so.
Oh, okay.
Kevin,
well, welcome,
I'm
Kevin.
here. All right. Sorry.
Let's try Sandra. See if Sandra's muted. All right. How about Bob? Bob, were you able to dial in?
And again, as a reminder, this is Judith, star 6 to unmute yourself. I always get stuck on that.
Good reminder.
Okay, this is Sandra. I'm here. I didn't do the star 6, sorry.
Welcome.
All right. Good catch. Was that Judith who had the suggestion?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Judith. Good catch. Okay. How about Bob? Are you with us, Bob?
So I might suggest that you all move on to public comment while Bob works through the remaining technical issues, and I'm sure he'll understand, and in theory we'll be able to get to his agenda item and give that due course as well.
Sounds good. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, we had 25 minutes of discussion on public comment. We thought it would make sense to build in a bit more time just given the volume of the comments. Would anybody like to pick up that discussion?
I can
Hey,
start.
Bob.
Oh,
Go ahead.
so this is Judith, 95 Colorado. For me, I just want to first just thank Admira and just the CLE staff for accepting the, comments that came in. I think that, again, I know that they were a little late, but I think it's really important for us to see these that are coming from diverse community members. And I think that they're very, thoughtful. I think as I tried to catch up on these, because there were a lot, I think another trend that I saw from a lot of these comments were around how many employers provide PTO, so paid time off, and that they have different mechanisms around how you accrue that. For example, one was 3.8 a month and 1 sick day for 30 hours worked, and how these different accrual methods are actually really, really stressful for workers, since this PTO is for vacation, it's for paid sick days, it's for bereavement leave, and so I think there was a common thread of how perhaps, employers are providing, paid time off in this fashion, but that it actually leaves workers in a very stressful situation. For example, I think there was various examples of people feeling like they have to choose between, taking time off for bereavement or taking time off to take care of a loved one that's sick, and knowing that will impact their vacation. And so they were saying that that's very demoralizing for employees, that they can actually use their full vacation because they know that. And I think it just demonstrates too that people are making sacrifices, that they won't actually have any time to enjoy their vacations of their hard work, and in reality are using that to take time off to take care of ill loved ones that are very severely ill, or for themselves. So I think, I think that highlights that PTO accrual is not sufficient for workers. And I think there was another one as well. It was, I just don't have it in front of me, but he was a benefits manager, and how he really sees employees in crisis mode, and he doesn't see how, folks actually want to, they really want to just take the time that they need for their family members, and so that is very difficult for people to do that when this PTO accrual is not enough. So it's a common thread.
So this is Dana Haygood.
Go ahead, Dana. Sorry, I was going to hop in, but this is Kathy, and I'll wait till you're done.
All right, thanks, Kathy. I also want to thank Admira and the team for putting that all together. It was just very diverse thoughts on a complex topic, so it was interesting reading, and some folks I thought were very, very clear in whether they support the state doing something like this or if they were against it, and others, I wish we had the opportunity to talk with them because I wasn't quite sure what they were trying to communicate. Some of the comments that really stood out to me on the employer side is the employers who are already offering programs outside of just basic PTO. There was a number of employers who were just stressing, and I've asked this question a couple of times, of what problem are we trying to solve if employers already have paid leave programs like short-term disability, long-term disability, paid parental leave, bereavement leave. There's stuff much broader than just offering PTO. I've seen the stat of 16 to 17% of employers in Colorado are already offering that. And just in reading those responses, it just really took me back to if the focus of what the state is trying to do is offer employees paid leave, I think that we should be holding up employers that 16% who are already doing it and encouraging them to keep doing it versus providing something that will be more expensive on top of what they're already doing and forcing them to pick and choose. Because I think most employers won't do both. They'll pick. So if we give them the option to opt in if they want to do what the state is, that makes a lot of sense to me. If we're going to take a all-comers approach, I just keep going back to I don't understand what problem we're trying to solve if we're going to put something on them that they're already offering to their employees. So some of those comments from employers just really resonated with me on something that we're going to just have to be thoughtful about in how we go forward with this.
Thanks, Dana. Kathy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was really struck by the fact that, like, as Judith said, that a lot of people did have things like short-term disability, but or generous PTO, like for vacation or their own sick time, but that didn't cover the needs that they had. So, and just the diversity of people like grandparents talking about having to care for their grandchildren, or grandchildren having to care for their grandparents, or other people caring for people outside of that traditional family definition. And you know, and Dana, I agree that if employers are really offering like a menu of things between short-term disability and parental leave, and you know, maybe serious medical leave, and they have all of these things that basically are equivalent to a paid family and medical leave program, then that is great, and maybe they should be able to do that. I think, you know, most of the other states that we've talked about have some kind of a equivalency. They have an equivalency type plan, so they're called voluntary plans or private plans, and that seems to be working in all of the states that have them: California, New York, California, New Jersey, and so, you know, and I think, to answer your question, what problem we're really trying to solve is we're trying to solve the problem of the fact of all of those other people. I mean, 16% of people having some kind of paid leave, or having some kind of, having like 13% having paid family leave. Like when you look at low-wage workers, that number drops to like something abysmal, like 6%. That's, I think, the issue that we're trying to solve. And it's not 6% of employers, it's 6% of employees who are considered like in the bottom 20% of earners have no access to any kind of paid family leave. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think I really appreciate this conversation and thinking about how we're all highlighting what we found interesting through the comments. But I think it really does point to the fact that it's a complicated issue. There is a lot of unmet need out there, and yes, there are some things that are being met. And so how do we design something, or how do we make a recommendation, or how do we just turn over information to the people who will have to do that, to say, this is the problem we're really trying to solve, and how can we solve it without, you know, affecting these people over here who don't seem to have a problem, right? And I think it can be done because other states are doing it. So I just wanted to say that that's what I pulled out of this set of comments, was really that people have like a patchwork of stuff that they're doing, and none of it is quite right? And so how do you design a blanket that goes over that patchwork net, and so that you make sure that you get the universal goal, which is to get everybody the ability to take paid family and medical leave when they need it, so that they are all able to get the benefit that we know comes from having access to paid family and medical leave, from the expert reports and from the PDHE report, from experience in other states and other countries. And so I think that's really the challenge. But I do think it's doable. So that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is Jared from A Better Balance. Yeah, just want to build on that, and in response to, you know, that comment, Dana, you know, I do hope on Thursday we'll be able to dig in, and as we think about recommendations to some of those models, because as Kathy said, there are measures in place in the other programs, whether it's around other, plan options, as well as some incentives for, the employers who are already meeting some of the requirements. So, there are models. So I just want to put a pin in that conversation because I think it will be helpful to talk about some of them. And some of this is also informed by the experience of my organization, which I know I mentioned was previously doing 3 months of generous full wage replacement for paid family and medical leave before a state law went into effect. And so I'm also happy to speak about the provisions in the law that we've seen in a number of states that have actually made it financially better for us as an employer that was in the minority providing these benefits after the fact. So do hope we'll be able to dig into that because there are ways to kind of, meet that concern based on experience from other states while meeting, again, the need that was a major takeaway for me from the public comments, which was the huge unmet need and, the devastation that a lot of workers have seen, and until something is done, we'll continue to see in, these critical life moments. So look forward to talking more about some of the specifics that we could look into.
This is Stacey Campbell, and Kathy and Jared and Dana, and I appreciate your comments. And this is kind of where I'm struggling. And you read some of these comments, and they are heart-wrenching. I mean, some of them are really heart-wrenching. And what I struggle with is how much leave is enough. Because some of the comments, there's not enough leave that a company could give that would be enough to satisfy what their need is. And so that's where I'm kind of struggling, is how much is enough? And, depending on how much it is, who's going to pay for it? So anyway, that's something that I'm struggling with, I think, as I read through these comments. And it's somewhat troubling to me.
Mm. Well, Stacey, this is Kathy, and I know you and I have gone we've probably had 12 weeks of conversation about this.
I know.
Over the last year. So I appreciate your input, and I appreciate, I appreciate that you kind of struggle with it. And I think you're right, because in a way, this is, it is for these serious life events. And so, and it's hard when you start to think about how much really is enough, because every case is sort of individual, because everybody's lives are so different and their needs are so different. But I think that, I thought that the CDPHE report was really helpful, where they could say, for at least for maternal health, here are some guidelines. I thought it was also really helpful with the family caregiving in other states, where people were like, well, yeah, you can give this benefit and you can say that it's for this long, but most people don't need it for that long. It really is just they're desperate for just a couple of weeks, right? Because I think it's also true that most people want to get back to work, right? Because work provides a lot of things, not only consistency and money, but it provides sort of stability and routine, and people at crisis points really appreciate that kind of stability and routine. And so for family caregiving responsibilities, that, all of the experience from other states, when people are taking care of a family member, they just don't use the full length of time that they're allowed to take. So, I think there are guidelines out there. I think there's research, and I think there's data. That again, maybe I'm just in an optimistic mood, but I really do think that we could make a recommendation to say that this seems reasonable, and it's going to meet 80% of people's needs. And you're always going to have the 20% outliers, but you can't really do public policy based on the 20% outliers, or at least you shouldn't. and getting at the 80% and meeting most of the people's needs most of the time is really good enough. And I think that's all we're really striving for, asking for.
Okay, and this is Stacy Campbell again. I appreciate the comment and kind of that insight to maybe how it might work by looking at something less than 100% of everyone's need, and trying to come up, because I think that's what we're going to have to do as a recommendation, is try to come up with what is going to be that balance between what's reasonable for the majority of employees and what's reasonable for the majority of employers.
Mm-hmm.
I think we agree there.
Mm-hmm. This is Lydia, and one thing that I was struck by through the public comments was the number of small businesses and employers that actually supported this, and also I was really top of mind of the comments from one of the larger employers, it was Merrick, that said they had employees that were under the New York plan and then employees that were under other states' plans, and really believed that a state-run plan could help them save money and provide similar benefits to their employees here in Colorado. And so I feel like we've heard that a few times through the public comments, and that's one that's sticking out to me. And so I feel like there were just an enormous amount of people that took the time to write in and say, this is something that would help my business as well. And so I just wanted to call that out.
Thanks, Lydia.
I also, this is Judith, 95 Colorado. I think that I also just want to highlight that in regards to the previous conversation with Stacy, I think that a lot of the newer comments that came in, I think overwhelming, we're asking for a minimum of at least 12 weeks. And I would just want to say that I think it was the presentation by Tommy from the Colorado Department, CDCAC, and I think it was very, again, very powerful to see that there is strong, correlation. So they are seeing how paid leave has direct impacts, right, to like decreasing maternal mortality, infant mortality, breastfeeding. And so I think that that's a very powerful correlation. Like, we can save lives for children, we can save lives for mothers if they have an adequate time of paid leave, and they're seeing that at 12 weeks, that's when they really see the benefit. And so, and I also saw some comments as well that, for example, in other countries in Europe, like they provide, a whole year off, or for paternal, or for paternity leave, they have like 6 months off. So I think that many other countries are providing even more generous benefits, and it's functioning in their societies, et cetera. And so that this really is a minimal floor where folks can really see a huge health benefit, and so I think that was actually really important for me, as all of the research that is being conducted for the task force. It highlights that information.
Thanks, Judith.
This is Edwin Zoe with Mama. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you fine, Edwin. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Yeah, a couple of points I want to make. First is that, I know there is a range of opinions from the small business community about this, and I can only speak to myself as well as my contemporaries and my circle of other small business entrepreneurs. And for me, there is no question that a state-run plan will make it better for both my employees as well as myself, for a variety of reasons that we have already mentioned. And frankly, at the end of the day, I think that it really is just the right thing to do for the people of Colorado. And then the second part I want to speak to And the concern, which I feel like, is a very legitimate concern that Dana brought up, is that why should I or businesses or organizations like ourselves, a large organizations, have any participate or have any benefits to that? And my observation, from my perspective, I would think that it would have a lot of benefits to them in that, from a statistical or actuary perspective, I imagine that corporate and businesses that provide really generous benefits, if they don't have to insure the first, whatever that number is, the first $1,000 or $10,000 of insurance, that tends to be the most costly part of any insurance plan. Certainly, when I shop for insurance, after I get the basics, the high deductible, whatever it is, an umbrella plan tends to be very, very inexpensive because they only insure the last dollar, not the first dollar. And so I imagine that if we do pass a state-administered plan, what likely will happen is that that safety net, is being the cost of that safety net is being distributed to the widest pool possible, which makes it much more affordable. And all the corporations or large organizations that have better or richer benefits just need to add on top of that. And I imagine that would be at the end of the day, when all the numbers come in, it'll actually cost large organizations and organizations with really generous benefits that will probably end up costing less, not more. So that's my feeling about that subject.
Thanks, Edwin. Hey, I'm just going to make a quick check and make sure that Bob Hinko has gotten back on the phone and we're able to hear him without any kind of echo. If not, we need to work on that while we're continuing the discussion of public comments. Bob, are you there? Bob, we can't hear you. Jeff, do you have a mobile phone number for Bob?
Okay, no, I got it.
All right. You're there. Good.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you. Are you getting that crazy echo?
No, and I'm fine. So I think I'm ready to go now. Unfortunately, I had that problem earlier.
Okay. Well, we've got about 45 minutes left.
Okay.
We were planning on splitting the time about half for public comment and half for a discussion with you, Bob.
Yes.
I'm curious if the task force would like to swap over the discussion with Bob or continue on with public comment.
This is Kevin. I just have one thing to add regarding Stacy's comments. Stacy, the law provides a maximum amount of leave. On page 6 of the DU study, the authors report average duration of leaves as a percent of the maximum allowed in the 3 states. So, if I understand this information correctly, short-term disability, the average in California is about 6 weeks. In New Jersey, it's 10. But if we look at the family part, average is about 5 or 4 weeks in California, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. And all of those average usage levels are below the maximum allowed. So the law may say 12. This gets to Kathy's point, but it looks like the average usage is less than that.
And Kevin, and thank you. I looked at that DU report, and I understand that. I think my comment was more coming from when you read the comments. Some of them, I'm just wondering, how much? Because I would agree with you that it talks about 12 weeks and that 6 to 10 weeks is being used. But there's never going to be, I don't think, enough leave that could cover everybody's needs. And so I think the point Kathy made, which I think was instructive, is that, look, we've got to, hone in on what's going to cover the majority of the folks. And maybe it is 12 weeks or something like that. So, but I appreciate that.
Great.
Hey, Greg, this is Kathy. Can I can I ask a question really quick?
Sure.
Well, is this our only chance with Bob? Bob, do we get more of you later on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, whatever your needs are, because I find it useful for me as well, because there are a lot of questions I have with regards to scope and, just to clarify a few things. I appreciate more conversations or interactions, if I could. And in fact, I have done some of that already with Jeff and Admira, and I have to say I'm very thankful of the assistance that Monique has given me as well with regards to getting information that I might need.
So if I can, Kathy, to answer your question, Bob's going to join us for part of our conversation on Thursday via telephone, and then we're going to talk to him after this call about trying to get together again on the 2nd of December after the report is done.
Okay, thank you.
I'm welcome to even a meeting before December, but it's up to you guys.
But Bob,
I think
Bob, you are planning on joining us on Thursday, correct?
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah.
I
So Kathy, we'll have a lot of time with Bob on Thursday.
Thank you. Although I do vote for moving to that conversation now, if we're voting.
Who else? Yeah, who else supports moving to the conversation?
Tara would like to move
polling,
to
not voting.
Yeah, Tara would like to move to the next conversation.
Yeah.
This is Jared. Yeah, I'd like to move as well. Although, don't know if we'll have a moment at the end or how to follow up. Jeff, I did look at my calendar, and that November 12th date, I don't know if I was the only person with a conflict, but I am on an airplane for a decent chunk of the day and somewhat limited with trying to reschedule it since I'm presenting on a panel. So, I know it's hard to schedule. I don't know if there are other options, but I know it's also a pivotal meeting, so concerned that I may not even be able to be on the phone for a large portion of the day.
Let's have that. Let's take 5 minutes at the end and talk about if there are any other options. And
that'd be great.
Jeff and Admira, you could pull up the availability for the various dates, because I know it was just challenging to get everything that works for everyone. So,
thank you.
Bob.
Yes.
Bob, would you be so kind as just give us a bit of give us a quick overview of what you believe the scope to be here, and knowing that we only are giving you about 4 weeks, what limits does that impose upon your ability to address given factors, etc.?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Yeah, we've had some discussion, as I indicated already, with Jeff. I originally got a list of statement of work, and then when I got the task force recommendations to actuary listing as well, I said, well, maybe we need to clarify the real scope of work. And that's when Jeff and I agreed that I should concentrate more on the task force recommendations to actuary as my scope of work. And I assume that's been approved, and we're going with that, Jeff, right?
Well, yeah, so that is very much part of the conversation we wanted to have today. Bob, if you can outline a little bit about your concerns and with regard to focusing on the costs and some of the variations as opposed to focusing on various timelines. So if you want to discuss that a little bit, I think it would be helpful for the group.
Yeah, the original scope of work basically starts out with defined parameters already for the program, and then from there run and estimate what the cost would be in the next 10 years, what the cash flow would be, but mainly the program well defined already as regards to the parameters. In other words, what's the maximum number of weeks of benefit, what is the basis for eligibility, all those kind of things. The task force recommendation basically identifies different scenarios that one might consider in coming up with what the parameters to run with would be. For example, with regards to the number of weeks benefits, it requires the calculation of what the cost would be if the benefits are limited to 4 weeks, say 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and so on. So basically, it's identifying different scenarios and then identifying how the cost differs for each of those scenarios, and then choosing which scenario would the plan be defined. Completely different things. And for me to do those two types, those different scopes of work together, obviously I can't do that within 4 weeks, and that would, require significantly more effort on our part. So that's the difference between the scope of work that originally was described versus what I think I should run with now.
So, Bob, pardon me, this is Kevin Duncan. I'm an economist at CSU Pueblo. And
yes.
So what you're thinking about is an existing program measuring the cost over a 10-year period. That's kind of
one
what,
kind of what that's
right.
one that's what I thought the original scope of work was. And then now the task force recommendation is basically evaluating difference in cost depending on changing the scenario that you'd run with.
Okay, and you're saying 4 weeks is not enough time to do that?
Okay. I think 4 weeks is enough. Of course, it depends on how many more scenarios you want me to evaluate, other than what is listed in the task force recommendation to actuary already. Okay.
Okay.
I don't think this is obviously complete for you to define a program, so to speak. In other words, for example, one question that I have is, is the program going to reimburse the full extent of the employee's salary, or is it a percentage of the salary subject to a maximum? That kind of thing. And what are those parameters? What are those assumptions that need to be used? Is it 50%, 66% of the salary, or what? So
yeah.
But the way the task force recommendation is defined now, I believe we can complete some kind of cost estimate in 4 weeks.
And so, Bob,
you're saying 4 weeks. I thought I had more time than that, though. I guess if you say 4 weeks, that's the middle of November, basically. Is what the only schedule that I have in the scope of work is completing a final report by November 22, I believe. Am I right? Is that correct? Okay. And I think we had some discussions early on, Jeff, on that, asking if that could even be extended 1 week or so. And I think you said that there's a flexibility to do that, perhaps. And I'm, relying on that to be true. But
yeah. So Bob, let me jump in just on a couple things. So what we talked about is that we had the flexibility to extend that to the 29th, and our most what we want is a quality product as opposed to a rushed product. So by all means, we have the capacity to extend that to the 29th, and that'll be within the parameters of what the task force timelines are. But more generally, I want to loop back to the scope of work, because it may not have been clear the way I think we sort of patchworked communicated it, and that is that in the original scope of work, we had asked for parameters with regards to what might a cost be for 0 to 5 years, What might a cost be from 5 to 9 years? What might a cost be from 10 on? And Bob and I had a conversation about it would be really, really challenging to run all of those scenarios for all of those time frames. And the concession in terms of value to the task force in our mind was that it would be far more valuable to the task force to have the variations on the combinations for what we would call, quote unquote, a mature program. So, for example, don't worry so much about what it might be in startup from 0 to 5, or what it might be from 5 to 6, or 10 plus, but rather just focus on a mature program getting at all the variations that the task force wants. That's sort of the concession we had about the scope of the work over that limited time frame. And I want to do a check-in with the task force that would in fact be the most valuable thing for you. I'm speculating a bit, but I do believe, and I want your feedback here, I do believe that would be the most valuable thing for this task force. Am I right in making that assumption?
Yeah. This is Tara, that is correct.
This is Edwin, so I agree.
Okay. Kevin Duncan, yes. That would be useful for us, but also for the state legislature.
This is Kathy, and at the, oh God, I hate to argue with my economist friends here, these experts, but I feel like the cost for a mature program, does that mean then that you're setting your sort of reserve targets or your loss ratios or whatever in the first 5 years of operation? So instead of looking out 10 years, thinking like, well, who knows what's going to happen in 10 years? I mean, are you looking in that first 5 years to like, what premium do you need to collect? What reserve targets do you have to have based on a mature program, or maybe based on like sort of increasing, or like, is it mature meaning like this is what you feel like this is what it's going to be at the end of your like outreach and all of that stuff? It's like kind of worst case scenario. Is that what you mean by that, Jeff?
I guess I can comment on that, Jeff, if I could.
Please.
Well, okay. And that's a very good question, because when we say mature, when does that happen? I don't know when mature happens, but one of the assumptions that I am going to make in my evaluation of cost is how much of those that are eligible to take advantage of the program actually do take advantage of the program. Because I know for a fact that, let's say for paternal leave, there are a lot of fathers that are eligible for it, but for some reason do not take advantage of the benefit, either because maybe they're not aware of it, or maybe there are some circumstances that might prevent them. So I guess for me, maturity means when all those are eligible to take advantage of it, does take advantage of it. I guess that's my definition of mature. Or maybe a point.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Kathy, this is Kevin Duncan. What I envision as far as the scenarios is variations on what the University of Denver study has done. It's kind of looking at the cost in a year given a utilization rate. And I think that's what Jeff means. It's fully implemented. And implementation might be cheaper than like full implementation, but we know what $800 million will get in terms of a certain salary replacement and duration of leave. So what I think would be useful for the legislature is to see, well, what if everyone has sticker shock over $800 million or $1 billion program? Well, if we paid $600 million for one, what kind of program would we have? What would we have to do to duration of leave, wage replacement, maybe some other characteristics to get it down to $600 million? Or what would a $400 million program look like? So that people have an idea, particularly the legislators, they understand what they're getting for their money. If you want a quality program, do you have to pay $800 million? Can you get a satisfactory one for $600, or what do you have to give up to lower the program cost? That's what I think that's what these scenarios could provide, that kind of information. I don't think the 5-year, 10-year projections mean that much, because who knows what's going to happen in that period of time.
No, well, and I totally agree with you, Kevin. But my question is really like, how time sensitive is the analysis? So if we here's what I'm trying to think. So what are you thinking? You're like, is the analysis going to say in year 1, here is the premium that we are going to collect for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, or whatever, right? Based on what we think the first 2 years of claims experience is going to be, because we have no sense of what the claims experience is going to be. Bob, when you estimate that claims experience, is it like sort of worst case scenario, as you said, everybody who's eligible takes the full amount that they're eligible for? So you have to charge a premium, right, to prepare for that. Yes. And then, I mean, how sensitive is that over a 5-year period, say? So like you're building to like certain ultimate losses, right? Like the projected claims that you're going to have. I don't know what you guys call that in the actuarial business, but what is it? Something like expected, loss ratios or something. Like, right. So what premium do you need to be charging in that first year in order to build up sufficient reserves so that you can pay out claims, whatever your claims experience is going to be in that following year or the year after? Like, I'm just wondering, like, how dynamic is that, Bob, over those first, 4 years or 5 years? Because I think that's what legislators are going to really care about. They're going to want to say, we want to set up a program. How do we set it up to be sustainable based on these varying factors, right? And part of that is literally setting, it is not a programmatic or a policy decision. It is a claims, like it is a premium decision. It's a financing decision. How do you set your premium? What do you set your target reserve ratios at? And how do you predict, or how do you forecast what your claims are going to be over the first year, over the second year, over the third year, and ensure that you have a premium that can float or not, or a reserve ratio that triggers some other kind of financing action so that your program is sustainable from day one into day, 5 years later. That's my question.
Yeah, I guess the way I was setting it up as of now is trying to estimate the cost at maturity when the program is mature already. And now I can also estimate what the cost is when the program starts, okay? But the issue there is, do I have to estimate the cost of maturity or maybe at the beginning or maybe in the next 5 years for every scenario, or whatever you guys have chosen the program to be? Once you have seen the variability of cost, assuming various, varying parameters. Because, for example, on what is described in the task force recommendation, I mean, there are so many variations here that I need to calculate what the cost would be, and then to then project that even for each of the next 5 years. I mean, that's, I think, too much of a scope of work to accomplish in the 4 weeks that that I have. So I thought the exercise is first to come up with a information that would enable you to select, okay, this is the program that I want to go with, and then let us then project what kind of premiums or what kind of reserving we might need for this program in each of the next 5 years or even 10 years. Let me just point something out as well, because when we talk about cost, I'm to me, cost is what you need to pay for claims, and claims only. Premiums to me includes not only the cost of the claims, but also the administrative cost, whatever loading you need to put in to calculate the total premiums. So are we looking for premiums here, or are we looking at just a cost comparison of how much you would pay for the benefit? And I guess the reason why I'm asking that as well is because then if we need premiums, then that would complicate things as well, because it depends on how you're going to administer this program and what the cost of administering the program will be, which obviously not only don't I have information on, but also that that would obviously inject complications on the process.
So this is Tara. So I want to echo what Kevin said and agree with him that I think what's most useful point for the task force and then ultimately for the policymakers is to have just what you're describing, which is to tell us how basically a typical year's cost in a mature program will vary by some of these core program parameters, right? So we know that the costs are really driven by a handful of parameters, the eligibility threshold, the wage replacement formula, the maximum weeks duration, and understanding how sensitive annual costs, and by that I mean claim costs, not adding on the administrative costs, vary by that is, I think, what's most useful for us at this point. And adding on top of that, affects your ability to do a good job on that, which is the most important. The thing I would like, if possible, to get some information from you on is actually for that core job of estimating costs based on program parameters like the eligibility threshold, the wage replacement formula, the maximum weeks duration, is understanding what sources of information you're going to be using to calculate those costs. Are you going to be using information on claims from existing programs? Are you going to be information on work leaves separate from current paid leave programs? If that question makes sense.
No, I mean, that's a key question here as well. We'll try to get as much information as possible, but the ideal is for the program to be in place already, and then you actually get the historical experience for the program itself. But obviously, we're a startup program, and therefore we need to rely on other sources of information. And what I mean by that is, with regards to basically, my sources would be a combination of what's available based on, like, say, Department of Labor statistics on Colorado, demographics for Colorado, in combination with whatever I can get from any write-up on programs from other states. Now, with regards to information from other states, what I have Googled so far and what I have read so far is not, entirely specific. They do give snippets of certain information, but not, so I have to kind of deduce some kind of information that I need from that. That's not exactly describing what my needs are. And then certainly, just to give an example, let's say what is the impact? How would cost vary? For example, when you change the eligibility from, let's say, a person that has earned at least $300 for the year, or at least I think 2,500, or at least 3 times 2,500 a year. For that, I need, let's say, a distribution of how much workers in Colorado have earned over a 1-year period. And, you know, I have to be thankful Monique was able to give me that kind of information. So that's, you know,
So
based
Bob?
on, yes.
Yeah, so this Tara again, sorry to interrupt. So what I'm hearing from you is that you haven't yet identified the data you're going to use yet to make these calculations. The other thing I do know from interacting, I've interacted with both with authors of both of the reports we have so far about what data they used and what data is available, and they both communicated to me that sort of detailed claims data from the existing programs is not available, not available to them, and it sounds like it would also not be available to you. And so what I'm wondering then is what basically what you're going to be able, what you will and won't be able to do. So for example, the example what you just gave, which is moving the eligibility threshold, that one's actually a pretty easy one because we have good demographic data that can allow you to calculate what fraction of the workforce is above a threshold. But on the other hand, suppose we want to find out how will changing the maximum number of weeks allowed from 6 weeks to 8 weeks to 12 weeks, how will that affect our costs? And it seems to me that without better information from existing programs in what fraction of their current claims are above different thresholds, that's going to be a very hard calculation to do to sort of estimate how the costs are going to change as you increase the number of weeks of benefits allowed. Can you speak to that a little bit?
On how I'm going to address that?
Yes, or if you have any ideas or thoughts.
Well, okay. Just to restrict ourselves to the example that you described, no? So maximum benefit weeks is 4 weeks versus 8 weeks. Okay. So the way I would address that issue is right off the bat, I would think a first estimation of how much the cost would be at 8 weeks versus 4 weeks would be that the cost for 8 weeks would be twice the cost of 4 weeks. Okay, but there are also other factors that come in the analysis, such as a person who's limited to 4 weeks might take advantage of the whole 4 weeks, while somebody who is given the opportunity to have 8 weeks might not take advantage of the full 8 weeks because maybe 4 weeks or 6 weeks is enough for him. So I have that ratio separately, meaning I have a ratio that I call percent of those that are eligible that will take advantage of it as a factor. So there will be less people. So instead of, you know, a factor of 2, maybe I might choose a factor of 1.6. But there will be some judgment involved in that because I don't have any information on that kind of
so thank you.
Data.
So if I can make one, I know I'm using a lot of time, so I'm just going to make one final comment and then be quiet. But so in response to that, what I would say is that that's my assumption is that you are going to have to make some judgment calls in absence of that allows you to actually do these costs. And so I think for the purposes of this task force, at those times when you have to make those types of judgment calls that are really not based on detailed data, then
That's right.
the most useful is for you to actually provide us with some cost estimates that make different judgment calls. So rather than saying, okay, I'm just going to choose a factor of 1.6 to make show us cost estimates for a couple of different, you're having to make those types of judgment calls.
That's right. That's right. That's a good point. We will be available to perform sensitivity analysis. If you don't agree with some of the judgment calls I have made, and you prefer something else, and you want to know what the impact is for the on cost, then we'll run the that assumption for you and see how it affects cost.
Hey everybody,
Bob,
I just want to.
Can I ask one more question?
Kathy?
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me for over talking you, Kathy. We'll let you go just in a second. I just want to make a point here. We've got just 15 minutes left, and I'm hearing a few different things that we're going to need to continue the discussion on. Data sources, are they mature sources, or are we just using guesses? And if so, we need to be clear about, the sensitivity of adjusting those guesses, the moving of different thresholds, and the sensitivity if we change duration, wage replacement. Bob can do that. But the critical question that I haven't heard, and hopefully, Kathy, you're going to go here, is the discussion around cost of a mature program versus full startup. And then the last thing we need to make some agreement on, and I'm just trying to summarize, is are we talking premiums or just cost of claims? Okay, so it seems to me like we're going to need to continue this discussion at some point on Thursday, and I will try to carve some time for us to do that. Kathy, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm really going back to the scope of work, that we have like a bunch of cost estimates for what the claims are going to cost based on, right, just who we think are going to use, who do we think are going to like make a claim, who do we think they are, how much do they earn, and how long do we estimate that they're going to take time off. And we have that. We have like 4 really good estimates of Colorado's program for that. I'm not sure that that is what the legislature is looking for. I think they are really looking for more of an actuarial analysis, which goes into this question of not just claims cost, but premiums, loss ratios, all of these things to help them decide how they set up a program that will be an insurance program that will be solvent based on the parameters of the product that they are insuring and the eligibility criteria of that. And I really think, based on the governor's letter, that, and I don't know, Bob, I don't know if you can do this, but like, how do these questions of premium costs, right, and solvency premium costs, really, because the state wouldn't really care about this except unless they're like an insurer of last resort, which they are interested in the governor is interested in looking at what that looks like. What do the premiums look like for businesses of different sizes, right? Or employees of those businesses based on a totally separate private market model? That to me, it seems clear to me that is what the governor is looking for. I know for sure that the Speaker of the House is really looking for an actuarial analysis of like, how do we set up our reserve ratios or our loss ratios? How do we, forecast claims? What is our ultimate loss over a period of time? And we design a program around parameters that make sense in those financing structures. The cost estimates are things that, you know, and maybe I'm wrong about this, and maybe other people on the task force can jump in about this, but cost estimates are things that our experts have done. IWPR has a very sophisticated model that looks at, you know, leave-taking behavior and can project. They have given us an estimate of what they think claims are going to cost and what they think, just based on claims, what premiums would need to be. What I don't think we have is the other factors that go into designing a solvent insurance program. So, and that's what I don't know, maybe other people, Dana, maybe correct me. You're in insurance, but.
This is Edwin Zoe with Mama. I have a couple of points I wanted to bring up. First, to be sure, the comment was made that the range that we had talked about is 4 to 8 weeks. And it was my understanding that it was going to be 4 to 16 weeks. I just want to make sure that was indeed still the case based upon our last meeting. And then the second part is that Kathy, actually, I take a different perspective of my understanding what the legislatures are really looking for. Is that in terms of the funding or the premium, that's a factor of cost. So if we know what different programs cost, then we can decide on how the premiums or how it's going to be funded, be it through you know whatever mechanism that the legislatures decide. And it is my understanding that what they're really looking for is basically a matrix of, okay, if we slide this between 4 weeks, you know, to 8 weeks to 16 weeks, how does that vary? How does that variation affect the cost of the program? And based upon what you're saying, Bob, is that you do not have enough time or resources to provide all those levers, or actually more of those dials in terms of the range. Is that correct?
I for the 4 weeks that I'm allotted, and for the task force, what's in the task force recommendation to actuary, I think I can come up with variations in estimates. I mean, it depends on how much more you're going to add to this recommendations. In other words, what other parameters should vary. Mm-hmm. I guess. I mean, if you add, you know, 6 more items, I mean, obviously that's out of the question. But if you just add 1 or 2, you know, that kind of thing, then I think that's doable. And I'm saying it's doable also because although I'm trying to get as much information as possible, to the extent that I'm not able to, then I would use some judgment. So there's that, you know.
Well, I think for the task force, it's certainly important for us to know if we need to tighten up on some of those parameters in order to be able to get good data from you. Then we need to be very aware of how much we need to tighten up. And then the last comment is that in terms of any assumption, you know, I completely understand to some degree we're looking into a crystal ball and trying to figure out, you know, what the various scenarios and it's going to require educated, you know, yes. But I think it's really important that we understand when those educated guess and assumptions are being made rather than coming from more firm data.
That's right.
Greg,
that's right.
Greg, this is Stacy Campbell. I know we got to go here in a minute, but Bob, is there a way that at our next meeting you could just kind of lay out in an outline format for everybody, guys, with all the stuff you've given me and with what I'm tasked with, this is what I believe I'm going to be able to do.
Sure.
Is that something that you could provide at our next meeting is the 17th?
It's 2 days from now.
Because I think that would be helpful, at least for me. And, maybe it gives you an opportunity to kind of put together what you think you can do in the time we've given you.
Yeah, no, I do have that written down someplace already, so I will pass it on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is.
Sorry, this is Jeff. Can I
Sorry.
just piggyback on
I
what?
just wanted to, can I just interject something? Because Kathy brought up a few things. Yet she brought up some studies where the numbers were already calculated. Can I avail of those, whatever studies the committee has that might be helpful from my end?
Absolutely. And I'm happy to put you in touch with like some of those people who, like, there's somebody in my office who has built a model
Okay.
that is sensitive to like 15 different policy levers.
Okay.
There is somebody at the Institute for Women's Policy Research, which is they're using like a very sophisticated model that was developed by the University of Massachusetts and I think Northeastern University, somebody who works for the Boston Fed, where they really look at leave-taking behavior, and they have like looked at Colorado's program. They look at Colorado's like workforce data and can calculate what they think claims costs will be based on these various factors of leave-taking behavior. You know, as you mentioned, you know, men, high-income white men, basically, who maybe they have 12 weeks or unlimited leave time for family leave, don't actually end up taking it. They end up taking like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, because people maximize their, you know, they maximize their benefit because they're rational actors. And so they have their model. I'm sure they'd be willing to share that with you. The University of Denver has also done, you know, as Kevin mentioned, they did an expert review study and where they really looked at different, one of the economists there, Paula Cole, looked at the different leave-taking behavior and utilization rates from other states and like built these different scenarios. And I don't know how sensitive their model is to those types of changes, but I do think that, you know, like we have like a good sense of like what cost is going to be. I'm really hoping that we could get from you all is your sort of insurance brain. Like, how do you, if you're going to start a new program, that's a new insurance program, you're offering a new insurance product in a completely virgin market, right? And you have some entrepreneurial business that wants to do that. What are the guardrails that you put around that product so that it is solvent over time and delivers the benefit that you want it to deliver?
Just in reaction to that, Kathy, that's actually the scope of work that I thought initially we were tasked for. And, you know, we're ready to run with that scope of work. But that's a scope of work that requires you to fully define already what the program is. In other words, what's the eligibility requirement is. What is the maximum benefit in terms of weeks? Yeah. In other words, it's well defined now. Now we're being asked, okay, can you vary these different levers so that we can compare what the costs are? Now that's a different. That's the.
So Bob, if we were to give you two different models, right? So one that says, here's the program that is a state-administered program, right?
Right.
Meaning you've got this giant risk pool. You're going to give this level of benefit for this group of workers because it's everybody. And then you have this pool, right? So it's a privately insured, like kind of like a workers' comp style type thing that we have going on here. Okay. Sure. And you exclude these workers. What is the, you know, and then can you tell us, like, what is the premium going to be under that model versus this model? What are the reserve ratios that you're going to need to hold? How do you forward fund this program? What market share do they need? Like, can you tell us that kind of stuff if we give you those two options?
Yeah, I mean, 2 options is fine, but not, you know, a whole.
Not 50.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
This is Greg. If I could just make a super quick point. This is Jared from A Better Balance.
Yeah, go ahead,
I just want to, and I'm hoping that Thursday we can dig in a little bit more into what is possible, because I do just want to echo what Kathy was saying in terms of also what I was hearing and my understanding from legislative leaders, which was real questions about solvency and startup. You know, what is a program, particularly if workers and employers are going to be contributing before the benefits start? What needs to be in place to make sure that this gets off the ground, that this is sound? And, you know, that's what I was hearing repeatedly in terms of why an actuary would be so valuable, these questions around solvency, startup, and making sure that the assumptions built into the legislation on things like premium, reserve ratios, et cetera, were calculated to make sure that this is started in a way that ensures it's off the ground and continued solvency. So I do want to think more about whether there's some way to touch on that, along with some of the questions with perhaps it has to be more minimal policy parameters to think about, because that's definitely what I was hearing repeatedly and in some conversations from legislative leaders about what they wanted to see out of this.
But the thing though is that if that we're going to concentrate on that, then I come in once you define what the program is, though, okay? And it doesn't seem you're at that point yet, and that you need some studies to help you identify how the cost varies by the different levers.
So, Bob,
Yeah.
can you differentiate by big levers? So, eligibility criteria, meaning workers who work for firms with 50 or more employees, 8 weeks versus 12 weeks max. Are those the kind of levers that you could do, right? Like maybe 2 different scenarios. Maybe not all 18 levers, you know, people with red hair and, you know, people who have a grandmother living in like Sterling or whatever. But could you do those big levers for both a private market option, right? Like a workers' comp, what Colorado's workers' comp style thing, versus a social insurance program?
I guess I wouldn't know which ones are more significant unless I go through the different levers and then rank them. I don't know if I can guess which one has more impact at this time.
So it seems to me, folks, that we need to continue this conversation. We did carve time at the very beginning of the meeting on Thursday. And Bob, you need to have access to the expert studies that we have seen thus far.
Okay.
And I think it behooves all of us to reread the legislation in terms of, you know, who they've asked to do various things, because I'm reading part, you know, the department, blah, 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 experts under contract with the department. And then that's where they list the 17 or 16 factors. Okay. So I think for us to all go back to the legislation is important. Bob, for you to share the outline of what you think you're able to do. And then I think we need to continue this conversation, because any further conversation around all the ranges that we might want you to opine on or compute upon might be wasted if we are going to make a different decision than kind of the range model.
Oh, and I hope you give me more time. Okay. So I'm going to expect somebody to send me a listing of those studies.
Yeah.
So Bob,
okay.
that's what Bob, that's what Admir and I already sent you.
Oh, I went over it and I didn't really think that.
That's the report that they're referencing, the materials we already sent you.
Yeah.
So Bob, I can email you the IWP, at least the IWPR, you know, like their methodology and their model and what it looks at, and contact information at the University of Massachusetts.
Yeah, let's all do that. Let's get Bob as much information as we can. And then Bob, we need for you to understand, or to having heard this conversation, perhaps come with some options of what's viable. You can go this way with up to a certain number of factors, because I heard you say earlier, maybe if you give you 2 more factors, it's within scope. If we start giving you 6 more, then it breaks the camel's back. We're planning on reviewing, I think, 6 more factors on Thursday. So that information right up front is necessary for us. So,
okay.
Jeff and Admira, how about we get on the phone with Bob tomorrow and kind of outline the remainder of the discussion that was originally planned, so that we can craft a beginning of the agenda that helps us get to a tighter defined scope. Go ahead, Stacy.
Greg, so I would also suggest that maybe, it sounds like Jeff and Admira had been the corresponding folks with Bob, and I think instead of task force members individually sending him things, I think we should kind of do it through a coordinated effort, and that way, everybody in the task force knows what's being sent, but he doesn't get bombarded with, with some things from everybody.
I think that's a fine idea.
This is Lydia. I would agree, and I would be open to be on that call tomorrow if helpful. Stacy, would you agree?
Depending on when it is, yes, depending on when it is, I can be on there probably as well.
All right. So then the last thing that we had hoped to do was talk a bit about schedule. Jared, you had mentioned that you weren't able to make that time. Do we want to hang on the phone for an explanation of why the date was chosen, or do we just say, hey, look, Jeff and Admira did the best they could within the range, the available dates, and anybody can try through their own means to try to free themselves for those dates?
Yeah, this is so. I apologize. I came in a little late. I did not know what dates were selected.
Sure. The dates that we're talking about are a next task force meeting in person on the 12th of November, a call with Bob to get his initial report on December 2nd, and then December 17th for another in-person task force meeting. Times of those meetings aren't yet determined.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to get into this if the folks want, or we can move it to Thursday. Lydia, Stacy, would you like me to get into this or no?
I'm sorry, Jeff, say that again.
Would you like me to talk about the availability in the matrix on who is available now, or do you want to have this conversation on Thursday?
I think it might make sense to have it on Thursday. Lydia, what do you think?
I think Thursday is fine. I will say that when we looked at November 12th, I looked like one person was not available on that day, and now I think that there may be more people that has become a bad date for. And so I so appreciate everyone making room in their calendars. I know that this feels like a lot of work, and it absolutely is. And so let's bring our calendars with us and do the best we can to make that date work, if at all possible.
So what I'll say, I'm happy to bring this material to Thursday's conversation. I want to emphasize there were no days where everyone was available. So we focused on days where only one person that was a voting member was not available, or 2. And so I'll leave it with that context, and I'll bring more information on Thursday.
Okay.
Okay. Stacy, Lydia, Bob, Jeff, and Admira, if you guys wouldn't mind holding the line, we'll see what times we can get together tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Lydia, over to you.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and adjourn for this evening, and we will see everyone bright and early Thursday morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you all very much.